Camilla Hartwell is a powerful millionaire CEO known for her ruthless efficiency, cold demeanor, and obsession with perfection. Her pristine red Ferrari is the only thing she claims to truly trust. One morning in a quiet, working-class neighborhood where she's opening a new branch of her tech empire, Camilla catches a young boy, 8-year-old Elijah, touching her car. She explodes in fury, but before she can leave, the Ferrari breaks down. To everyone's shock, Elijah kneels beside it calmly and points out what's wrong, then gently fixes a faulty valve with nothing but his hands and a rock. Camilla is frozen, not just by what he does, but by how he does it. It reminds her of someone she buried deep in her past, her younger brother. Over the next 12 chapters, we unravel the story of a powerful woman haunted by childhood loss, slowly drawn into the life of a boy and his struggling, grief-hardened single father. Through unlikely friendship, shared pain, and small acts of kindness, Camilla is forced to face her trauma, rediscover her empathy, and realize her success means nothing if it's not shared. By the final episode, the cold CEO is gone, and in her place stands a woman who learned to heal, love, and rebuild not just engines, but broken hearts. The sun hadn't yet burned through the early morning mist as the red Ferrari pulled into the cracked, narrow street. The engine purred like a wildcat, clean and proud amid the faded brick buildings and graffiti-tagged shop fronts of a forgotten neighborhood. Camilla Hartwell, CEO of Hartwell Dynamics, didn't usually step foot in places like this, but today was different. Today she wanted perfection, and perfection meant seeing things for herself. She checked her reflection in the rearview mirror, sleek black blazer, razor-sharp cheekbones, eyes that didn't blink unless necessary. She was 39, commanding, and feared in every boardroom from Wall Street to Singapore. But outside her car, a world she hadn't touched in decades unfolded like a forgotten chapter. She parked near the edge of the construction zone, where her company was building a state-of-the-art innovation hub, supposedly to uplift underdeveloped communities. In truth, it was good PR and cheap land. She stepped out, heels clicking on the broken pavement, eyes scanning the workers, the scaffolding, the delay that shouldn't have existed. Then she saw him. A boy, maybe 8 or 9, was crouched near the back of her car, small fingers running across the edge of the rear bumper. He was thin, wearing a hoodie 3 sizes too big and shoes taped at the seams. His expression wasn't mischievous. It was focused, almost reverent, as if he were studying a sacred object. "Hey," she snapped, the words sharp as glass. The boy jerked his hand back like he'd been burned. He stood quickly, eyes wide, lips pressed tight. "Did your parents teach you to keep your filthy hands off other people's property?" Camilla strode toward him, her voice steady but rising with each step. "This is a $250,000 car, not a playground." "I wasn't gonna hurt it," the boy muttered, staring at his sneakers. "Just looking. Well, now you're done." She opened the driver's side door. "Next time, keep your eyes in your head and your hands in your pockets." She sank into the leather seat, slammed the door, and pressed the ignition. The engine coughed once, then again, but didn't turn over. Camilla blinked. She pressed it again. Nothing. No lights. No sound. No engine. A few construction workers glanced over but quickly looked away. Her eyes went to the dashboard. Everything seemed fine. She tried the manual override. Nothing. She cursed under her breath. Then she heard a quiet knock on the passenger window. It was the boy again. "I think I know what's wrong," he said, muffled through the glass. She rolled it down an inch. "What I saw the valve thing twitch when you parked might be loose. It's happened before on cars like this. My dad used to fix them. She raised an eyebrow. You think you can fix a Ferrari with your bare hands? He shrugged. I could try. She looked around. No mechanic in sight. Her assistant wasn't due for another hour. Against every instinct, she popped the hood. The boy moved with surprising precision, almost silent. He didn't hesitate, just went straight for a small intake near the back, felt around, and nodded. Yeah, it's loose. He grabbed a small stone from the ground and used it to wedge the valve tighter, then twisted it with his fingers. His hands moved like someone who had done this 100 times before. Camilla watched without speaking. Something in his calm focus unsettled her. Try it now, he said, stepping back. She turned the key. The engine purred to life instantly. Camilla stared at the boy, her mind grasping for something clever to say, something dominant or dismissive. But nothing came. You fixed it, she said, almost to herself. He nodded once, not smiling. I like how cars work. Before she could respond, he was already walking away, heading back toward an alley. She opened the door, standing halfway out. Hey, what's your name, Elijah? He said, without turning around. And then he disappeared around the corner, leaving Camilla alone, with her engine running and a strange, unfamiliar tightness forming in her chest. Something about that boy's voice, his hands, the way he looked at the engine, not with fear, but understanding it all, felt like a shadow from a memory she thought she'd buried long ago. She sat there for several minutes, unmoving, while the car idled gently beside the quiet morning street. Camilla didn't drive straight back to headquarters. Instead, she pulled into a coffee shop near the edge of the neighborhood, one of those places where time moves slower, and the walls still smelled faintly of tobacco and old newspapers. She ordered an espresso she didn't need and sat by the window, staring out at nothing in particular. Her fingers drummed against the porcelain cup. She told herself she was simply thinking about logistics, about construction delays, supplier contracts, the quarterly report due Monday. But no matter how she shifted the thoughts, they curled back to that boy, Elijah. It wasn't just that he fixed the car. It was the way he moved, that stillness in his shoulders, the intense attention in his gaze. She had seen that before on a small face smeared with grease, kneeling beside a broken toaster in a group home kitchen over 25 years ago. Dean. She hadn't spoken that name aloud in over a decade. The last time she saw her younger brother, he was 8 years old, curled up in a metal frame bunk bed, clutching the toy car they built together out of bottle caps and coat hangers. Social services had come for her the next morning. She got adopted by a wealthy couple in California. Dean didn't. A year later, she received the letter. Foster home fire, no survivors. Camilla never let herself grieve. She buried it beneath ambition, beneath layers of board meetings, accolades, and executive power. She built walls made of stock options and silence. But this morning, when Elijah's dirt-covered hands gently coaxed her Ferrari back to life, something cracked. She didn't realize how long she'd been sitting there until the espresso had gone cold. The traffic outside picked up. Workers walked by with paint buckets and tool belts. A school bell rang in the distance. She stood, left a $20 bill on the table, and stepped back into the heat. Against every rational bone in her body, Camilla turned the car around and headed back. She told herself it was a fluke, that maybe she'd imagined his skill, projected her past onto a coincidence, but she needed to be sure. The construction site was quieter now. Workers were inside, pouring cement. The street was nearly empty, except for a rusted bicycle lying against a fence. And Elijah, there he was again, sitting on the curb, sleeves rolled up, fixing a busted chain. He didn't see her at first. He was too focused, holding the bike steady with his knee, threading the greasy links with a bent nail and a shoelace. His brows furrowed in concentration. His lips moved muttering instructions to himself. She stayed in the car and watched. It was uncanny. When he finally noticed her, he stood quickly, wiping his hands on his hoodie. "You came back," he said, not hiding his surprise. Camilla got out, arms crossed. "I had questions about the car." "No," she said quietly. "About you." He looked confused, wary. "I don't need anything," Elijah said. "If that's what you think." "I didn't say you did." They stood in silence, the sounds of a hammer striking wood behind them. A breeze lifted dust into the air. She glanced at the broken bike. "How long have you been fixing things?" Elijah shrugged. "Since I was 5, I guess. My dad used to teach me. Before everything got harder." Something in his voice trembled, but he pushed it down fast. Camilla recognized that reflex. She had it too. "I have more tools at home," he added, "but sometimes you just use what you got." Camilla looked down at his hands, cracked, scarred, stained with oil. Not from playing, but from working, trying, surviving. "Where is your dad now?" she asked. "Home. He works nights. We don't have a lot, but he says fixing things makes you feel less broken." Her chest tightened again. She didn't know what to say. She wasn't used to silence that wasn't strategic, but this wasn't a negotiation. It wasn't a press conference. It was just a boy and a bike and something she'd lost long ago. "I'll see you around." "Elijah," she said at last. He nodded. "Okay." As she drove off, she didn't realize she'd been holding her breath until it came out in a long, unsteady exhale. This wasn't over. Something had shifted. And for the first time in years, Camilla didn't feel entirely in control. Camilla didn't sleep that night. She lay in her penthouse bed, staring up at the ceiling where the recessed lights cast soft shadows across the molded plaster. Her mind replayed every second of that morning, Elijah's hands, the sound of his voice, the quiet certainty in the way he fixed that bike. She had sat in 100 interviews with world-class engineers, had funded think tanks, acquired billion-dollar startups, but none of them moved like that boy did. Not with instinct, not with heart. Around 3 a.m. She opened her laptop and stared at the screen. For a moment, she hovered over the company database, tempted to send a message to her assistant to ask for records family info, school files, anything on the boy named Elijah. But something stopped her, not because she couldn't, but because it felt like cheating, impersonal, wrong. She closed the laptop and instead did something she hadn't done in years. She opened a drawer. Inside were things she never had the courage to throw away: a cracked plastic toy car, a worn-out flannel shirt that still held the faintest scent of smoke, a photo of her and Dean, him grinning, missing 2 front teeth, arms wrapped around her waist like he never wanted to let go. She touched the photo gently, as if afraid it would crumble. By morning, her decision was made. She returned to the neighborhood not as a CEO, not to oversee a project or tighten a schedule, but because something inside her told her that she needed to see Elijah again, to understand what had stirred in her chest, to face something she'd run from her entire adult life. She dressed differently this time. No blazer, no heels, just a cotton shirt, dark jeans, and running shoes. She left the Ferrari at home and took her old silver Lexus instead. No one stopped her when she parked in the same spot. The construction site was active, but she ignored it. Instead, she walked along the sidewalk, scanning the nearby houses until she saw Elijah again, crouched in the front yard of a small, weather-beaten house with peeling blue paint. He was fiddling with what looked like a broken blender, parts spread out over an old towel. A bucket sat nearby, filled with tools that didn't match. When she stepped closer, he looked up. A flicker of surprise crossed his face, but he didn't move. "You came again," he said. Camilla nodded. "You're good with your hands." He shrugged. "It helps." "What are you working on?" "Trying to fix this for Mrs. Davis next door. Her hands shake too much to use her knife, so she makes smoothies. The blade's jammed." Camilla glanced at the parts. "That's kind of you." "She gives me apples," Elijah replied with a soft smile, as if that explained everything. Before she could respond, the front door opened. A man stepped out, tall, wiry, eyes shadowed with fatigue. He looked between them and frowned. "Elijah," he said gently but firmly. "Inside, now." The boy hesitated but obeyed, gathering the towel and tools without protest. The man turned to her, cautious. "Can I help you?" he asked, his voice low, guarded. Camilla stepped forward. "My name is Camilla Hartwell. I met your son yesterday. I know who you are." He folded his arms. "You're the woman who yelled at him for touching your car." She didn't flinch. "Yes, that was me." Silence stretched between them. "And now you're back," the man said. Why? Camilla took a breath. "Because your son fixed something I couldn't. And because I haven't been able to stop thinking about it." His gaze softened, but only slightly. "You don't owe us anything. We're not looking for a handout." "I'm not offering one," she replied. He studied her, then extended his hand. "Marcus? Camilla?" He nodded, slowly. Elijah talks about machines like they're people. He sees them that way, understands when something's not clicking. His mother was like that too. She passed 3 years ago. Since then, it's been me and him. "I'm sorry," Camilla said quietly. Marcus nodded again, this time with less defense. They stood there a moment longer, no longer strangers, but not yet anything else. Just two people who knew what loss looked like, even if they hadn't said it aloud. "I should go," Camilla said. Marcus didn't stop her, but as she turned, he said one last thing. He's never had someone notice him like that before. "Not really." Camilla paused. Neither had she. Then she walked away, but this time with the strange weight of knowing she was no longer just visiting a neighborhood. She was returning to a memory and maybe, unknowingly, stepping into a future she didn't see coming. That evening, Camilla stood at the edge of her balcony overlooking the city skyline, rows of steel and glass, catching the golden haze of dusk. The world below buzzed with precision, like clockwork. But her thoughts drifted not to mergers or profits, but to a modest house with peeling blue paint and a boy who spoke to machines as if they had souls. And to his father, Marcus. There had been something in his eyes, not just exhaustion, not just the guardedness of a man who'd been burned too many times. There was pain there, but more than that, dignity. He had looked at her not as someone powerful, but as someone who could do harm. And in some small way, she had. Her voice that day outside the construction site sharp. Cutting was still ringing in her own ears. But Marcus hadn't asked for an apology. He hadn't asked for anything. That, more than anything, had shaken her. The next morning, she called in late to the office. For the first time in years, she simply said, something personal came up, and hung up before the assistant could ask questions. She returned to the neighborhood a third time, this time with intention. Elijah wasn't outside, but the door was open. A small, oscillating fan buzzed just inside the living room. She approached slowly and knocked on the door frame. Marcus appeared in the hallway. No surprise on his face this time. Just a quiet sigh. "You're persistent," he said. "I'd like to talk." He nodded once and stepped aside. Inside, the house was small, worn, and immaculately clean. The furniture was secondhand. The walls were lined with faded photos, most of them framed with mismatched glass. One in particular caught her eye, a young woman, laughing in mid-motion, holding a tiny Elijah in her arms. His mother. Camilla took a seat where Marcus gestured, on a sagging armchair near the window. "You didn't come just to say thank you again," he said, sitting opposite her with a quiet steadiness. "So, what is it I don't know yet?" she admitted. I don't usually care about people. Not really. And I don't mean that cruelly, it's just how I've survived. But your son, he reminded me of someone I lost a long time ago." Marcus studied her for a long moment. "Family. My younger brother," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "Dean. We were in foster care together. Got separated when I was adopted. He didn't make it out." Marcus's shoulders lowered slightly. His eyes softened. Camilla looked down at her hands. "I've built my entire life on staying sharp, staying ahead. I made myself untouchable. But that kid, he reached past all that in less than 5 minutes. You're not the first person he's fixed," Marcus said, almost absently. Camilla looked up. "He doesn't know how to be still," Marcus continued. "Not since his mom died. Keeps his hands busy. But it's more than that. He looks at things, at people, the way a mechanic looks at a broken engine. Not with judgment, with curiosity, with hope." She swallowed the lump rising in her throat. "You said he reminded you of your brother," Marcus said. "Is that why you're here, guilt?" "No," Camilla said after a moment. "Not guilt. Maybe longing." The house fell quiet again, only the fan humming in the background. Then, from the back room, Elijah's voice rang out faintly, something about fixing the toaster again. Camilla smiled, faintly. "He doesn't stop." "Does he?" Marcus shook his head. "He's relentless. Like someone else I just met." Camilla laughed, surprised at herself. There was a shift in the air, barely perceptible, but it was there. A quiet bridge forming between two people who had spent most of their lives building walls. Before she stood to leave, she reached into her bag and pulled out a small box wrapped in brown paper. "What's this?" Marcus asked. "A set of new tools, real ones." For Elijah, he hesitated. "No strings," she added. He took the box, nodding slowly. "I won't forget this," Camilla said as she stepped toward the door. "You shouldn't," Marcus replied. "Some things are meant to stay fixed." She walked back to her car feeling both lighter and heavier. Lighter for having spoken truth. Heavier for what that truth stirred. She didn't know what this connection would become. She didn't plan to see them again. But somewhere deep in her chest, she knew she would. Camilla didn't go to work the next day. Her calendar was packed: board reviews, 2 investor calls, and a televised appearance scheduled for the evening. But she canceled them all with a single text to her assistant. "Postpone everything. I need the day." And for once, she didn't feel guilt, not even a flicker of it. She stayed home. No phone, no distractions, just silence and the nagging pull of something unhealed. It was nearly noon when she stood in front of the old oak dresser in her bedroom. Her hand hovered over the bottom drawer, the one she hadn't opened in years. Inside it lived a part of herself that had been sealed off, labeled too painful, too far gone. But now, after Elijah, after Marcus, Something inside her was shifting. That drawer was no longer a grave. With a quiet breath, she slid it open. The smell hit her first dust, old paper, and something faintly sweet, like childhood memories preserved in silence. The contents were few: a yellowing manila folder, a small toy car fashioned from 2 spoons and rubber bands, and an envelope filled with photographs. Her hand trembled as she lifted the envelope and spilled its contents gently onto the floor. There he was, Dean, 8 years old, grinning wide, front teeth missing. In one photo, he was sitting cross-legged on a brown carpet, screwdriver in one hand, half-dismantled radio in front of him. In another, he stood beside her, arms wrapped tightly around her waist, cheeks flushed with sun. Camilla sank to the floor. The images blurred through tears she didn't bother to stop. She had buried him for so long, not just his memory, but the version of herself that had loved him, protected him, fought for him, and then left him. She had told herself it wasn't her fault. The adoption was out of her hands. She was only 11. They took her away, and the system lost track of Dean. She remembered screaming, clinging to his shirt while the social worker pried her away. That was the last time she saw him. The fire happened a year later. Faulty wiring in the foster home. No survivors. She hadn't cried then. Not when she heard the news. Not when the new family bought her a pony to cheer her up. Not when she graduated top of her class or made her first million. She had pressed it all down, turned it into ambition. But today, a boy with grease on his palms had brought her brother back. And now, all the grief she thought she had outsmarted came rushing back, unfiltered and relentless. Camilla curled over the photos and let herself weep full, shaking sobs that clawed their way out from beneath years of practiced silence. She wept for Dean, for the childhood stolen from them both, for every time she whispered his name in the dark and heard no answer. But somewhere between the sobs, a thought slipped in, soft and persistent. Maybe this isn't the end of Dean's story. Maybe Elijah is the page I never got to turn. The idea wasn't rational. It wasn't clean or professional or productive. But it was human. She stayed on the floor for a long time. When the tears stopped, she gathered the photos gently, placing one inside a new frame, the one with Dean holding the screwdriver, half smiling, eyes burning with focus, just like Elijah. She set it on her nightstand. Then she stood, wiped her face, and walked to her closet. She needed to go somewhere. Not to a gala or a press event, but back to the neighborhood. Back to the boy with the eyes that reminded her of someone long gone. Not to fix him, but maybe to let him fix something in her. The following morning, Camilla arrived at her company headquarters with a quiet determination that surprised even her. The glass towers gleamed under the rising sun, a stark contrast to the worn neighborhood she'd been visiting. Yet today, she wasn't here to command or negotiate, she was here to extend a hand. She sought out Marcus first. After some inquiries, she found him working the night shift in the underground parking garage, his janitor's uniform stained but neat, moving with practiced efficiency. When he looked up and saw her standing there, a flicker of caution crossed his face. "Marcus," she said, her voice steady but soft, "I'd like to offer you a job, maintaining the company vehicles and equipment, full-time." He blinked, taken aback. "I'm just a janitor," he replied. "I don't have your kind of experience." Camilla shook her head. "I know you do, and I want you on my team." He studied her for a long moment, eyes narrowing as if trying to read a hidden motive. Finally, he said, "What's the catch?" "There's no catch," she said. "Just an opportunity Wordlessly, he nodded and extended a calloused hand. She shook it firmly. Later that afternoon, Camilla found Elijah waiting outside the building. His clothes were dirt-streaked, but his eyes shone brighter than ever. In her bag, she carried a small package. "I brought you something," she said, handing it to him. He untied the brown paper carefully, revealing a set of brand-new tools wrenches, screwdrivers, pliers, all neatly arranged in a worn leather case. His mouth parted in surprise. "These are real tools for a real mechanic." Camilla smiled. He looked up at her, eyes wide with gratitude, but also something deeper, a spark of hope. "Thank you," he whispered. For the first time in a long while, Camilla felt a strange warmth. It wasn't in boardrooms or stock prices. It was here in the small moments, the gestures that bridged worlds. As Elijah clutched his new tools, Camilla realized this wasn't just about fixing cars or bikes. It was about fixing broken pieces of themselves. She walked away that day feeling less like a CEO and more like a person who might, just maybe, have a chance to change. The gala was everything Camilla was accustomed to: glittering chandeliers, polished floors that reflected the shimmer of designer gowns, and the hum of conversations veiled in business jargon and superficial compliments. Cameras flashed incessantly, capturing her flawless smile, the poised tilt of her head, the calculated charm that had become her armor. She moved through the crowd with practiced ease, accepting congratulations on her latest business triumphs, the expansion of her company, and the inevitable questions about her next venture. Yet beneath the sparkle, beneath the applause, an unsettling emptiness settled deep within her. As she sipped the champagne, she overheard a group of guests whispering near the buffet. One of them smirked. "Did you hear about the Millionaire CEO who screamed at a poor boy for touching her Ferrari? Then he fixed it with his bare hands." Laughter rippled softly around her. For a moment, Camilla's grip on her glass tightened until the delicate crystal threatened to crack. A flush of anger rose in her throat at the ignorance, at the assumptions, but just as quickly. It gave way to something she hadn't expected: shame. The image of Elijah, the boy who didn't just fix her car, but had unknowingly cracked the wall she had so meticulously built, floated in her mind. She excused herself quietly, slipping away from the crowd and into the solitude of the balcony overlooking the city. The night air was cool against her skin, the distant hum of traffic a reminder of a world moving relentlessly forward. For the first time in years, Camilla allowed herself to feel the weight of loneliness that success had never filled. The accolades, the power, the wealth all felt hollow compared to the simple, unfiltered connection she had glimpsed in Elijah's presence. She thought about the child who never had a choice, who faced hardship with a quiet resilience that shamed her own guarded heart. And she wondered how someone so young could teach her something she had spent a lifetime trying to forget. Under the vast expanse of the night sky, Camilla closed her eyes and let the silence settle around her, knowing that something inside her had begun to change, fragile, uncertain, but real. She wasn't the woman she had been yesterday, and perhaps she never would be again. It wasn't long before Camilla learned that Elijah's birthdays were quiet affairs, if celebrated at all. After his mother's passing, the small traditions that once brought light to their home had slowly faded, replaced by survival and routine. No parties, no gifts, just another day in a long string of hard days. One afternoon, as she sat at her desk reviewing project plans, Camilla's phone buzzed with a message from Marcus. Tomorrow's Elijah's birthday. The words stayed with her throughout the day, unrelenting. She found herself imagining the boy's life, a life filled with quiet strength, but lacking simple joys. Without hesitation, Camilla decided to do something uncharacteristic. She reached out to her assistant with an unusual request to prepare a small, private celebration. No press, no fanfare, just a place where Elijah could feel seen and celebrated. The company's unused garage became the unlikely venue, cleaned and decorated with a handful of balloons and streamers. It was transformed into a space of warmth amid the cold concrete walls. Camilla arrived early that day, bringing homemade cupcakes, small, imperfect, but made with care. She arranged them carefully on a folding table alongside a simple card signed by the employees who had come to know Elijah. When Elijah walked in, his eyes widened in surprise. The balloons bobbed above his head, and a small group of smiling faces greeted him warmly. He hesitated at the doorway, overwhelmed, before a shy smile broke through. "Happy birthday, Elijah," Camilla said softly. He looked down at the cupcakes, then up at her, eyes glistening. "Thank you," he whispered. The party was humble, but to Elijah, it was everything. His laughter filled the garage as he blew out candles, surrounded by people who cared. Later, when the guests had left, Camilla sat in her car, the quiet hum of the engine barely masking the tears that slipped down her cheeks. She had spent so many birthdays alone, surrounded by trophies but devoid of connection. Tonight, watching Elijah celebrate with genuine happiness, she understood how hollow her victories had been without someone to share them. The road ahead was uncertain, but in that moment, Camilla felt a flicker of hope that healing wasn't just possible. It was beginning, and sometimes it started with a simple birthday party in an unexpected place. It was a rare evening when Marcus agreed to meet Camilla at a small diner near the neighborhood. The fluorescent lights hummed softly above them, casting a warm glow over chipped tables and vinyl booths worn thin by years of use. The air smelled of coffee and fried grease, familiar and grounding. They sat across from each other, cups of black coffee steaming between them. Marcus's usual guarded demeanor was softened tonight, replaced by a weariness that seemed to weigh on his entire frame. "I've been meaning to tell you," he began slowly, eyes fixed on the rim of his cup, "about that night when my wife died." Camilla listened intently, sensing the heaviness behind his words. "It wasn't just an accident," Marcus continued, voice thick. "I blamed myself. Should have been there. Should have fixed that old heater before winter. But I didn't. She was the heart of our family. Without her..." I shut down. He took a deep breath and met Camilla's gaze. "Elijah kept us going. He's been the reason I didn't fall apart." Camilla felt a lump in her throat. For all her success, she had never spoken of her own losses. "I understand," she said quietly. "I lost someone too. My brother, Dean. We were separated by the system, and then he died in a fire." The words hung between them, fragile but true. Marcus nodded slowly. "Loss changes everything. Sometimes it makes you stronger. Sometimes it breaks you. But it doesn't have to define us," Camilla added. "Sometimes it's the place where healing begins." They sat in silence for a moment, two wounded souls acknowledging their pain without judgment or shame. Marcus finally smiled, a small, genuine curve of his lips. "You're not like the others, Camilla. You see more than just the surface, and you're not just a janitor," she replied. "You're a man who knows what it means to keep going." That night marked a turning point not just for Marcus and Camilla, but for a fragile bond forming on shared grief and newfound trust. Both carried scars, but together, they began to imagine a future where healing was not only possible, but inevitable. It didn't take long for the story to spread. What began as a quiet moment, a young boy fixing a millionaire CEO's stalled Ferrari, with nothing but his bare hands, soon spiraled into a viral sensation. Social media exploded with headlines: "Millionaire CEO yells at poor boy." Then he fixes her Ferrari. "Billionaire's breakdown caught on camera." And "boy genius outsmarts CEO." Reporters camped outside Camilla's corporate headquarters, flashing cameras and shouting questions she wasn't prepared to answer. The boardroom was filled with hushed whispers and sideways glances. Investors called, some with concern, others with veiled threats. For the first time in her career, Camilla felt vulnerable. But instead of retreating, she chose transparency. In a carefully crafted statement, she acknowledged the incident openly. She praised Elijah's talent, spoke of her own shortcomings, and announced the launch of a new foundation aimed at providing technical training and mentorship for underprivileged youth. The backlash was immediate. Some mocked her, accusing her of exploiting a feel-good story for publicity. Others praised her courage and sincerity. Camilla stood firm. At a press conference, she said plainly, "Success means nothing if it's built on fear and isolation." I was wrong to judge Elijah. He reminded me of something I'd forgotten: that talent and humanity are not limited by background or circumstance. Her words resonated with many, stirring conversations about privilege, opportunity, and the power of community. Behind the scenes, Camilla was still grappling with her own transformation. The public apology was just the beginning. The real work was personal, unraveling years of emotional armor, embracing vulnerability, and learning to lead with empathy. As the media frenzy continued, Elijah and Marcus remained steadfast, quiet pillars of authenticity amid the storm. Camilla realized that sometimes the greatest lessons come not from triumph, but from the humility of being seen as human. And for the first time in a long time, she felt ready to change. The months that followed the public apology were a whirlwind of change, not just in Camilla's life, but across the community she once viewed from a distance. The foundation she launched in Elijah's name became more than a gesture. It became a movement. Camilla sold her second home, a sprawling mansion in the hills, and invested the proceeds into transforming a rundown warehouse in the neighborhood into a fully equipped community garage. The space buzzed with energy. Tools clanked, engines roared, and laughter echoed off the concrete walls. Marcus was appointed director, a role he accepted with quiet pride. He brought with him years of hands-on experience and a deep understanding of the challenges faced by the neighborhood's youth. His approach was patient and firm, guiding each student with the care of a mentor and the insight of someone who had walked the hard road. Elijah was the foundation's first student, his eyes wide with excitement as he learned to wield real tools, work on complex engines, and dream beyond the broken bike chains and faulty valves that once defined his world. Camilla herself found a new rhythm. Gone were the tailored suits and endless meetings. Instead, she wore jeans and work boots, spending hours in the garage alongside her students, learning, teaching, and most importantly, listening. The walls of the garage bore the marks of transformation, sketches of engines, motivational quotes, and photographs of smiling faces. It was a sanctuary where broken things, cars, bikes, and sometimes even people found a chance to heal. As the sun set over the city one evening, Camilla wiped the grease from her hands and looked around at the bustling space. The laughter, the camaraderie, the hope. It was unlike anything she had ever built in a boardroom. She understood now that success wasn't about control or power. It was about connection, about investing in others, about building something real. And for the first time, Camilla felt she was exactly where she was meant to be. Years later, the neighborhood was no longer a place of forgotten corners and silent struggles. The community garage had grown into a beacon of hope, a symbol of resilience, and a testament to what could happen when people believed in each other. Elijah, now a young man, stood beside Marcus and Camilla in the crowd, gathered for the Foundation's 10th anniversary celebration. The sky was painted with hues of gold and purple, and laughter and music filled the air. Camilla watched Elijah as he spoke confidently to a group of aspiring mechanics, his hands animated, eyes bright with passion. The same spark she had seen in her brother Dean so many years ago had found its home in this boy she once met on a cracked street, touching her Ferrari. As the speeches ended, Marcus approached Camilla quietly. "You did something incredible," he said softly. She smiled, eyes misting. "We did it." The road had been long filled with pain, forgiveness, and unexpected grace. Camilla had learned that true strength was not measured by wealth or status, but by the courage to face one's past, the humility to change, and the willingness to lift others along the way. That night, as the city lights flickered like stars below, Camilla stood on the steps of the community garage. For the first time, she didn't feel alone. She was part of something bigger. A new beginning not just for her, but for a whole community. And as Elijah walked over, a genuine smile on his face, she knew that together, they would keep building a future shaped not by fear, but by hope, faith, and the unbreakable bonds of humanity.